The cold air bit into my skin as I stood outside, my breath curling in white wisps under the porch light. My mother's face was set in stone, my father's jaw clenched tight. The front door was still slightly open behind them, warmth spilling out, taunting me. But I knew it was over. "If you walk away from this, you walk away from us," my father had said, his voice firm, his hands gripping his belt like he was holding himself back. "No son of mine is going to waste his life chasing some fantasy." "I'm not wasting my life," I had tried to reason. "This is what I love. Writing is what I'm meant to do." My mother scoffed. "Meant to do? You're meant to make a living, Nathan. A real one. Something stable. Something respectable." My sister, Lisa, stood behind them, peeking out from the hallway. She looked torn, but she wasn't going to say anything. She never did. I swallowed hard, shifting the weight of my backpack on my shoulders. "I don't want to be like you," I finally said, my voice shaking. "I don't want to work a job I hate just to survive. I want to live for something." That was the final straw. My father's face twisted in rage. "Then get out. Go live for something. See how long you last." I half expected my mother to stop him. To say something, anything, to take it back. But she just turned away. I felt the ground crack beneath me. Not literally, but something inside me was breaking, crumbling, like the foundation of everything I had ever known. One moment, I was their son. The next, I was no one. The door slammed shut. I stood there, waiting. Maybe they'd come back. Maybe they'd realize they had overreacted. Maybe Lisa would sneak outside and whisper that it was all a mistake, that they didn't mean it. But nothing happened. The porch light flickered once, then died, plunging me into darkness. I walked. I didn't have anywhere to go. I had some money in my pocket, not much, just the tips I had saved from my last shift at the diner. Enough for a couple of meals, maybe a cheap motel for a night or two. The streets were quiet, the houses dark. Everyone was asleep in their warm beds, dreaming of their normal lives. I wasn't normal anymore. At a bus stop, I sat down, the cold seeping through my jacket. I pulled out my notebook, the one I had been scribbling in since high school. The pages were filled with unfinished stories, ideas that had come to me in class, at work, in the middle of the night. I opened it to a blank page. For a moment, I hesitated. My hands were shaking from the cold. Or maybe from the fact that my whole life had just collapsed. Then I wrote. "This is the night I lost everything." Or maybe, "This is the night I finally became free." I closed the notebook and pulled my knees to my chest, trying to hold in the heat. Tomorrow, I would figure it out. Tonight, I had nowhere to go. The first night on the streets was the hardest. I spent it at the bus stop, curled up with my backpack as a pillow. The cold bit into my skin no matter how tightly I wrapped my arms around myself. Every little noise, rustling leaves, distant footsteps, a car engine starting, kept me awake. I wasn't safe. I wasn't welcome anywhere. By morning, I was exhausted and starving. I spent my last few dollars on a gas station sandwich, eating it in small bites to make it last. I kept thinking maybe, just maybe, my parents would change their minds. Maybe I'd get a text from Lisa saying, "Come home." They regret it. But my phone was silent. No texts. No missed calls. I was officially on my own. The next few weeks were a blur of exhaustion, hunger, and rejection. I applied for every job I could find, walking into stores, diners, even a car wash, asking if they were hiring. Most places didn't bother looking up when they said no. Others just gave me a quick once-over and shook their heads. I wasn't exactly at my best, sleeping in alleys and parks didn't make for a great first impression. I tried shelters, but they were overcrowded. Some nights, I got lucky and found a bed. Most nights, I didn't. But through it all, I wrote. At night, I'd find a corner in an all-night diner, nursing a cup of coffee for as long as I could afford. When I couldn't afford that, I'd sit under a street lamp, my notebook balanced on my knee. The stories poured out of me. Maybe it was because I had nothing else. Maybe it was because if I wasn't writing, I was just another homeless guy on the street. Writing reminded me that I was more than that. I sent out short stories to magazines, but the rejection letters came just as fast. Not what we're looking for. Doesn't fit our style. Best of luck elsewhere. I started to wonder if my parents were right. Maybe this was pointless. Maybe I was just chasing a dream that would never happen. Then one night, after another rejection, I tore out a page from my notebook and stared at it. The words I had written hours before felt like they belonged to someone else. Someone who still believed. I held the page over the flickering flame of a candle. For a moment, I thought about letting it catch fire. Letting all of it burn. Then I stopped. Because if I let go of this, if I stopped writing, then I really was nothing. So I kept going. Eventually, I got a job at a small bookstore. The owner, an old guy named Harold, took pity on me after seeing me linger around the shelves too many nights in a row. "You read a lot," he said one day, sliding a coffee across the counter toward me. "Ever think about working here?" It wasn't much. Just a few hours a week, sweeping floors and stocking shelves. But it meant money for food. It meant I wasn't starving. It also meant I had access to books. I read everything I could: classics, modern fiction, poetry, even books on writing. When I wasn't working, I was in the back corner, scribbling in my notebook. Harold noticed. "Writer, huh?" he asked one evening, leaning against the counter. I hesitated before nodding. "Trying to be." He smiled. "Good. The world needs more stories." I didn't tell him how much I had lost trying to be a writer. But maybe, just maybe, I hadn't lost everything. Maybe I was just getting started. Years passed. I was no longer that kid sleeping on bus stop benches, clutching a tattered notebook like it was the only thing keeping me alive. Now, I had something real. Something permanent. My first book hadn't been an overnight success. It barely sold at all in the beginning. But then, one blog reviewed it. Then another. Then a journalist picked it up and wrote about the young writer who went from homeless to published. Suddenly, bookstores were stocking it. Suddenly, people cared. Then came the second book. And the third. And then, one day, I woke up to find my name on the bestseller list. It didn't feel real. I had spent so long being nobody, scraping by, struggling to survive, that I didn't know what to do with success. But it was here. The royalty checks were real. The emails from publishers, the interviews, the offers for movie deals, all real. And with success came something else. A message from them. It started with an email. A simple subject line: "Proud of you." No name. Just those 3 words. But I knew exactly who it was from. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. "Nathan, we've been following your success. We're so happy for you. We always knew you were talented. Come visit us. We'd love to see you again. Love, Mom and Dad." I read it once. Then again. The words felt fake. "We always knew you were talented." The same people who threw me out into the cold. The same people who told me writing was a waste of time. Who made me feel worthless for chasing my dream. Now, they were proud. I shut my laptop. For days, I ignored it. But then Lisa reached out. "Mom and Dad want to talk. Please, Nate. At least hear them out." And so, against my better judgment, I agreed. I met them at a fancy restaurant. It was surreal, sitting across from them again after all these years. My father had more gray in his hair. My mother looked older, but still carried herself the same way, like she was always in control. Lisa was there too, playing the role of peacekeeper like she always did. "You look good, Nathan," my mother said, giving me that same tight-lipped smile she used when talking to guests she wanted to impress. "Success suits you." I took a sip of water, not saying anything. My father cleared his throat. Listen, son. We know we were tough on you. But we were scared. We wanted what was best for you. Best for me? You threw me out, I said, my voice steady but sharp. You left me with nothing. You didn't even check if I was alive. They both winced. Lisa jumped in. They regret it, Nate. I swear, they do. Do they? I leaned back, folding my arms. Or do they just regret that I made it without them? Silence. My mother looked down at her plate. My father sighed. We want to fix things, he said finally. We're still family. Family. The word felt foreign coming from him. Then came the real reason they wanted me here. We're struggling, Nate, my mother admitted, dabbing at the corners of her mouth with a napkin. Dad had to retire early. Medical bills. The house is too expensive to keep up with. Things aren't easy. And there it was. They didn't want me. They wanted my money. I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. Unbelievable. Lisa reached for my hand. Nate, they made mistakes, but now they want something from me, I cut her off. Now that I have something to offer. I looked at my parents, both of them waiting, expecting. Once, I had been a desperate kid on their doorstep, hoping they'd let me back in. Now, the roles were reversed. And I was about to make them pay. I could have just said no. I could have walked out of that restaurant, left them to deal with the mess they made, and never looked back. But that wasn't enough. Because they didn't just throw me out. They erased me. They let me rot in the streets while they went on with their perfect, respectable lives, pretending I didn't exist. And now they wanted to pretend it never happened. I wasn't going to let them. No, if they wanted my help, if they wanted to be back in my life, then I was going to make them feel what I felt. I was going to make them beg. I smiled at them across the table. I hear you, I said smoothly. Family should help each other. My mother exhaled in relief, and my father nodded like he had expected nothing less. Of course, son, he said. We knew you'd understand. I leaned forward, elbows on the table. But first, I continued, I think we should be honest. Open. Clear the air. Lisa shot me a wary look. She knew me well enough to sense the shift. But my parents, blinded by greed, were too eager to notice. Of course, my mother agreed. Whatever it takes. I pulled out my phone, tapped the record button, and placed it between us. Great. Then let's start from the beginning. They blinked, confused. Let's talk about the night you kicked me out, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Tell me why. Say it clearly. How did you feel when you told your son he wasn't welcome anymore? My father stiffened. There's no reason to. You wanted to be honest, didn't you? I pressed. Or are we already lying to each other again? Lisa shifted uncomfortably, but my parents didn't move. I waited. My mother was the first to speak. Nathan, we've already said we regret. No, I interrupted. You said you struggled. You said things were hard. But you never said you were sorry. You never said you were wrong. The silence that followed was suffocating. My father clenched his jaw. My mother shifted in her chair. Neither of them spoke. I leaned back, picking up my phone. I'll take that as my answer. Lisa reached for my arm. Nate, please. I turned to her. You want me to forgive them, Lisa? Then let them say it. Let them admit what they did. I looked back at them. Say it. Say that you threw your son away because he didn't fit your perfect little mold. Say that you let him starve. Say that you left him in the cold and never once looked back. Their silence was all the confirmation I needed. I scoffed, picking up my phone and slipping it into my pocket. That's what I thought. I grabbed my coat and stood up. Nathan, wait, my mother said hurriedly. We didn't mean to. I laughed bitterly. You didn't mean to what? Watch me suffer? Pretend I was dead? Ignore me for years? Lisa wiped at her eyes, shaking her head. I tried to reach out, Nate. I really did. I softened slightly, nodding. I know, Lise. Then I looked back at my parents. But you? I exhaled, feeling years of anger and pain pour out of me in a single breath. You're not my family. You lost that right when you threw me away. My mother looked like she wanted to argue. My father just sat there, staring at the table. Good. Let them sit in their shame. Let them feel it. I took a step back. You wanted my help. Here it is. They perked up slightly. Find another way to survive. Just like I had to. Then I walked out, leaving them with the bill. I thought that was it. That I was finally free of them. That I had delivered my justice and could move on, leaving them to rot in their self-made misery. But 2 days later, Lisa showed up at my door. I almost didn't answer. But then I saw her standing there in the hallway of my apartment building, arms wrapped around herself like she was holding something fragile inside. I sighed and opened the door. Lisa. She gave me a tired smile. Hey, Nate. I stepped aside, letting her in. She looked around at the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the framed posters of my novels, the comfortable but minimal furniture. You made it, she murmured. Like, really made it. I shrugged, closing the door behind her. Yeah. I did. She turned to face me, her expression unreadable. So, that's it? You're just gonna walk away? Like they did to me? I shot back. Lisa flinched. Nate, they're struggling. They're scared. So was I. She exhaled, running a hand through her hair. I know. And I'm not excusing what they did. It was awful. Unforgivable, even. But you got out. You won. And they lost. I didn't say anything. Look, I get it, she continued. You don't owe them anything. But you do owe yourself something. And holding on to this anger, it's like letting them win all over again. I frowned. It's not about anger, Lisa. Then what is it about? I was quiet for a long moment. Then I said, it's about making them understand what they did. She sighed. They'll never understand, Nate. Not the way you want them to. Because they don't get it. They never will. And waiting for that? Wishing for it? It's just going to keep you stuck in their shadow. I swallowed hard, looking away. She sat down on my couch, voice softer now. You don't have to forgive them. You don't even have to speak to them again. But don't let them be the thing that still controls you. I sat down across from her, running a hand over my face. I don't know how to let it go, I admitted. Lisa smiled sadly. You already did. The moment you walked out of that restaurant, you let it go. But now, you have to let yourself move forward. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I had spent years proving to the world and to myself that I didn't need them. That I was strong on my own. But maybe Lisa was right. Maybe this wasn't about them anymore. Maybe it was about me. After a long moment, I nodded. Lisa smiled, standing up. That's all I came to say. I should get going. She walked to the door, but before she opened it, she paused. If you ever decide you do want to talk to them, just know that the door goes both ways. I nodded again, not trusting myself to speak. Then she was gone. I sat there for a long time, staring at the door, wondering if I'd ever walk through it the other way. I didn't call them. Not that week. Not that month. I told myself I was done. That I had nothing left to say. That they had made their choice years ago, and I had made mine at that restaurant table. But late at night, when everything was quiet, I'd find myself staring at my phone, Lisa's words looping in my head. You already let it go. Now you have to let yourself move forward. What did that even mean? For years, moving forward had meant proving them wrong. Proving to myself that I was more than the failure they thought I'd be. That I didn't need them. That I never needed them. But now, I had everything I fought for. The success. The freedom. The life they said I'd never have. And yet, I still felt like I was fighting a battle that had already ended. So, one night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I opened my laptop and started writing, not a book, not a short story, but a letter. To them. Mom. Dad. I don't know why I'm writing this. I don't even know if I'll send it. For a long time, I thought that proving you wrong would make everything feel right. That if I made it big, I'd finally stop feeling like that kid on the porch, begging you to see me. To accept me. To love me. But I was wrong. Because success didn't erase the past. It didn't erase the cold nights, the hunger, the loneliness. It didn't erase the fact that, when I needed you most, you turned your backs on me. And I don't think I'll ever forget that. But I don't want to carry it anymore. I don't hate you. Not anymore. I did for a long time, but hate is exhausting. And I've spent enough years giving you that much space in my life. You asked me to come back. But the truth is, I was never the one who left. You left me the night you closed that door. And I don't think we can ever go back to pretending that didn't happen. So no, I won't come back, not in the way you want. But if you ever decide to truly face what happened, to own it, not just brush it under the rug, then maybe there's something to salvage. Not for you. Not for your comfort. But for me. Because Lisa's right. The door goes both ways. Nathan. I stared at the letter for a long time. Then, before I could overthink it, I printed it, folded it into an envelope, and mailed it to their last known address. And then, I moved on. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't check the mail or stare at my phone, hoping for some grand, heartfelt apology. I just kept living. I wrote new stories. I traveled. I built a life that had nothing to do with them. And maybe one day, they'd reach out again. Maybe one day, they'd say what needed to be said. Or maybe they wouldn't. Either way, it didn't matter. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't writing a story about them. I was writing a story about me. And this time, I got to decide how it ended.